Hi folks, this is Don Meissner with the North Country Fishing Report. You know, in giving a fishing report, there's so much about fishing in our area. There's all the different species and all the different waters and all the different ways of fishing. And it becomes a pretty expansive opportunity for me to talk about fishing in our area. But I'll tell you, we've just had some major tournaments. And because I'm so involved with those, I get a chance to talk to the anglers from all over the country. And one of the things that we can learn from this is not only have the great opportunity of seeing these anglers hold their trophy fish up at the weigh-ins, but to get to talk to them and learn how they catch these fish. And you got to remember, whenever you talk to a fisherman that fishing is a real important thing to them, they're going to guard their secrets. They're not going to tell you where they go. They're not going to willingly tell you what they use, because this is their up over every other fisherman. This is their opportunity to be successful. And it's often very difficult for me to pass on to you what people don't want to give me. But a lot of these anglers shared a lot of the ways that they caught their fish in the St. Lawrence. And I think it's important because we can learn from them, and we can use the same techniques and go out and probably have the same luck. Remember, these people come here from other states. They've never fished this area, a lot of them. And so they're just like us when we go out into that big, magnificent river. Where do you go? How do I do this? And some of the things that they used over this last week were really interesting to learn about. An old technique that we never really talk about is the Carolina rig. And they call it the ball and chain. They said they brought out the old ball and chain that was successful for them. And what you're doing really is dragging along the bottom, your bait along the bottom. You do have the risk of gobies, but that's where those fish are going to be, near the bottom where they can feed on gobies. Another technique that really works for them, and we talk about it all the time, is drop shots. But when the anglers would get up on stage, or when they'd just be talking to me in private, they'd say the baits that they use. And one of the things that a lot of these anglers depend on is the Berkeley flatworm. This is something, if you can find Berkeley flatworms, and I know Walmart sells them, and I always love to give promotion to other bait shops, not just Walmart. But anyway, Walmart does sell these. And these are something you can use not only in the St. Lawrence, but any body of water you go in, and fish are going to want to hit them. They're little flat worm-shaped things that look like little gobies or little minnows or leeches, or, they represent a lot of things, and they're extraordinarily successful. This is something that if you just armed yourself with a number of Berkeley flatworm packages, you'd be all set for almost any place you go. Another one of the things that a lot of the anglers used is the age-old tubes. They talked about using tubes. Now, Berkeley makes a max scent tube that I think is fantastic, and I've talked to you about it before. It comes in a number of natural colors, and the tubes seem to work well for a lot of these anglers. And a lot of them talked about using chatterbaits. That's something that you can't go wrong with. I know when in the early part of the season, when I'm fishing for northern pike or anything that hits, often what hits is these big smallmouth hitting a chatterbait. And I'll tell you what, it's something you can't fail with. They have a little blade on the front of them that causes a very noticeable vibration in the rod tip. You can feel when that bait's coming through the water, you know that it's working. That chatterbait causes any soft plastic that you rig on it to really wiggle unbelievably. Has its own unique action, and the fish can't resist it. And chatterbaits are good for just about anything. So these are some of the baits that these anglers were using. I didn't hear any of them talking about spinnerbaits, and yet spinnerbaits work really well. You can't use spinnerbaits very effectively in deep water. They're a shallow water bait. But an awful lot of the anglers said they were still catching their fish shallow. I'll tell you another phenomena of these tournaments is often in the past you would never see anglers that entered these tournaments holding up largemouth bass. They didn't target largemouth. They didn't figure the St. Lawrence River's largemouth were big enough to be of significance. But I'll tell you what, in the last tournament, the Tackle Warehouse tournament, one of the anglers scored highly each day, and his whole limit of fish were largemouth bass. He had bass over 6 pounds in 2 of the 3 days that he weighed in. So our largemouth fishing is really, really catching on with people. They realize that they don't have to go far to get into waters that have largemouth. Any of the bays, or they were catching their fish in basically 10 feet of water. But largemouth bass are here in big numbers. And I hate to say this because it's something that I really enjoy, and I really get a kick out of being able to go to some of these backwater bays that we have in our area and catch largemouths, but now that secret's out. But anyway, largemouth bass played a big role in this last tournament. And you can use like spinner baits or chatter baits or surface baits to catch largemouth. And they're really effective. Anyway, these are some of the tips from this week, folks. Until next time, this is Don Meissner with the North Country Fishing Report.